Hello guys and welcome to our second installment of our complete game development series, and in this one we'll be making a game called the Infinite Runner. Now be aware that this one is a sequel of our previous series, the C# or Programming Fundamentals. Right, if you have zero knowledge of C# or programming in general, please make sure that you check that one out before coming here, because this one will not be covering the basics of coding. We'll only be jumping into the engine and start coding right away. So there'll be a lot of concepts that's something you probably are not familiar with if you haven't touched coding before, right? And of course, right, in this tutorial we'll be making the game Infinite Runner. It's going to be made in the Unity game engine. Alright, let's take a look at what we're going to be covering. The first thing is, of course, the Unity fundamentals, right? The basics of Unity. So that's going to include the editor, how does it work, right? Where is different panels, what do they do, right? And also, of course, the game object concept. What are they? How can we use them to compose our game? And then the scripting, of course, for Unity. How do we use C# to make game mechanics? And also, of course, the internal engine facilities like the physics engine and rigid bodies, right? Collisions, triggers, audio, UI, input, right? Those kind of systems. Okay, so let's also take a look at the game mechanics we'll be making here, right? The first thing is movement control. We'll be leveraging the new input system in Unity to create our simple controls. That's going to include the move and jump, right? Movement to the left and right, basically changing lanes, and then also jumping. We'll be implementing our own physics to make the player drop down, and then check the ground check, right? All those kind of like interesting things. And then of course we'll be also making this level generation mechanic. So we'll be importing those different assets for the level, but because our level is an infinite straight, right, we'll be generating the entire level on the fly. So we'll have the buildings, the street blocks, and then the cars and all kinds of other things, right? We'll be generating those things in our code on the fly to create our environment. That thing will be rolling with infinite variations and goes forever, right? That's our goal here. Right, there's going to be a bunch of interesting things happening in our coding to make it work. And of course, after that, we'll also be implementing the atoms. Things like the coins the player will be collecting, a speed booster when the player overlap with or pick up will actually increase the player's speed. And of course, also a trash can that will actually reduce your speed and also subtract scores for you, right? So a bunch of interesting gameplay mechanics there. And of course, right after that, we'll be doing a score and leaderboard system. This one is interesting. We'll have not only the score tracking to keep track of how much coins you have picked up, but also we'll have the engine to create the player profile for multiple players. You can add or delete profiles, and then the leaderboard will be there to show the highest score from each player. So we'll have this interesting leaderboard system, which will talk about how to save files to the disk and then load them in every time you have the game open and closed. So some interesting mechanic in there too. Alrighty, of course there are more stuff that we'll be covering, things like the input system, rigid body, physics, collision, recasting, right? Character control, camera, UI, audio, and save and load files, and so much more. So yes, there will be a lot of things. Every little corner of the engine will be touched here and there, just to get you familiar with how the engine works as a whole. And we're gonna make the entire game from scratch. No step is skipped. Alrighty, so some prerequisites here, right? First thing is that you have to understand the basics of C# or C++ or C. If you know that, that's fine. The fundamentals of C#, C++, and C are similar, although they're different things, but they're very similar, so it's easier for you to pick up. If you know some Python, that is satisfactory, but you have to do a lot of research yourself to get yourself familiar with the concept and syntax of the C# language. They're quite different. Alrighty, and of course, right, make sure that you check out our first installment, the C# fundamentals, before jumping into here if you have zero knowledge of C#. Or you can also pick up other tutorials, right, that's going to teach you C#, right? Make sure that you're familiar with C# basically before you jump into here. Alrighty, that should be enough of me rambling, right? Yes, of course, if you have any questions, right, please post it. I'll be trying to answer them as soon as possible. And we're gonna jump into the tutorials right away. Alright, see you guys in the videos.